Welcome back. Mississippi and Alabama are no strangers to severe weather season. Jackson Chastain explains how tornadoes form this week on Weatherwise.
Meteorologist Jackson Chastain with the latest edition of Weatherwise. Today we talk tornadoes. We are still in severe weather season. That is still a potential issue that we may be dealing with. So it's good to know how they form. And knowing how they form is half the battle. As they say in G.I. Joe, knowing is half the battle. Now, it all starts when you have two layers of wind that are kind of crossing over each other. You have an upper level layer that's moving in one direction, then you have a lower level layer that's moving in another direction. And then what that is, if you want to think about, if you have your two hands on a roller and they're rolling in two different directions, the roller itself is going to roll in one particular direction. Now that's basically what happens when you have these two air masses crossing over each other. You get friction and eventually you get rotation. You get this rotating tube basically of air in the sky that is rotating relatively quickly, but that's not the part that forms the tornado. Now it is, but it's not in the right direction, so you need a direction change. Well, the good news is that usually these things form in the middle of a thunderstorm, and when you have a thunderstorm, you have upward motion, very big upward motions. So when you have this rotating column of air, or rotating row of air that's kind of horizontal, you need to flip it vertical to get that tornado. And when you have a thunderstorm and you have upward motions through your updraft, it's going to grab that rotating tube and it's going to pull it vertical. And when you get that vertical motion, you get it stretched down to the ground. That's when you get that tornado. Now, that is basically generally what happens there, and obviously the updraft is doing its part in pulling that tube and flipping it vertical. And then when you get a tightening and an intensification of the rotation of that tube, and when you get that connection between the cloud and the ground, that is when you get a tornado. Now, oftentimes what happens is that you don't get the full effect. You'll get the tube, you'll get the rotation, but it may not necessarily make contact with the ground. And that's when you sometimes just see a funnel cloud, but you don't necessarily see a tornado, is that you don't see a complete vortex that stretches from the sky to the ground. So that's basically what you're seeing there when you're seeing a funnel cloud. But when all things come together, when all things work in an ideal world, you get that rotating column of air that's horizontal, flipped on its side, becomes vertical, stretched to the ground, and then it rotates quicker and you end up getting that tornado. Now, that's all I have for the latest edition of Weatherwise today. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to post those on Facebook, Twitter, or email. But otherwise, you guys have a good one.
Weatherwise is brought to you by Fort County Electric Power Association.